What's going on, everyone? Ryan Miles here from Team Ultra Reality Gaming, here with the one, the only, the Kirik hero. It is Joey Schilling from Team Rogue. What's going on, Joey?
It's going. A little tired from the trip, but doing well. Doing
Yeah,
well.
no, I imagine. So this is round two for us. We were trying to record this video the first time, and my computer decided that wasn't going to happen. So gonna try and just repeat it here, and so this time you guys can hear it. But yeah, let's go ahead and just dive right into the deck list while I've got you here. So the first thing I noticed when I was looking at this deck was the inclusion of 4 high speed and the lack of inclusion of the black cards. So typically, like the black lists will play the Majin Dark Elf, they will play the Ray the Black Owl, and both of those cards kind of have anti-synergy with high speed in the sense that Majin Dark Elf already has swiftness, in the sense that once Ray inverts, high speed just doesn't do anything. Well, you're only playing 8 real targets for high speed anyway, in the form of the Plele and the Holopig. Everything else in your deck has swiftness except for like Freyla. I guess you could have 10 targets for that. So what is the thought process behind the 4 high speed in this deck?
Okay, so that's actually 2 different topics at that point. The first part being the fact why I did not mainboard the Null Magic Stones and the Majin Dark Elves. The main thing behind that is I honestly believe that Kirik was going to be a big representation at the event, regardless of whether he would actually place or not. Ryan Miles believed that as well, and we wound up seeing, I believe it was 12 Kiriks at the event, which was the second highest representation for any deck list there.
That's correct.
And Null Magic Stone in the main board really hurts the mirror match. Most of the time, like, you're seeing 1 to 2, sometimes even 3 Null Magic Stones early on. And by the time you get around to like the turn 4, turn 5 point, you've already burnt yourself for like 1200 or 1400 life. Being able to add in Majin Dark Elf does not equate to the amount of, or the loss of life that you have suffered in order to play those in a Kirik mirror where life is everything. Those matchups are extremely bloodthirsty. And so I didn't want to have to deal with that in the mirror match. On top of that, I originally thought the Null Magic Stone was okay in the IU matchup because of the additional pressure from Majin Dark Elf, but it actually really stacks over time and can really hurt you in that matchup as well. So I was pretty excited with the fact that I decided to keep them out and keep them in the sideboard and just side into them for every Gil, Time Spinning Witch, Chamimi matchup, all those Matchups where you honestly don't care about your own life points because you're just trying to be progressive with your own plays. So that was most of the reasoning behind taking out Null Magic Stone and Majin Dark Elf, just to be safe, to ensure you can get game 1 against AU and Kirik mirrors. As for the 4 high speed, there are a couple elements behind that. The first being consistency. Consistency is very nice, ensuring that you never whiff on Kirik, because those 2 strength counters actually matter a lot of the time now that Lorite is just everywhere, and it's really hard to refill most of the time. The second part is most of your prioritized plays early on, specifically turn 1, 2, and 3, are going to be Pigs and Supremacies and PLs, and those do not have inbuilt or innate swiftness with them, and high speed gives them an additional stat line, allows them to swing early on, allows you to get that extra damage in. A second element to it is that Viola was going to be everywhere. It's in Chamimi lists, it's in Time Spinning Witch lists, it's in Gil lists. Whether everybody's playing her or not, I don't know, but all 3 of those rulers tend to play it to some degree. And high speed basically loses its remnant at that point. So you're actually losing half of your count, despite what number you were playing. Most people were playing like 2 high speed. And so most of those players, instead of having access to 4 high speeds in a game, now only have access to about 2. And the third element to it is it does actually just increase the burn potential of the deck. With 4 high speed and 4 sundering, you actually have 4,800 burn damage built into the deck, ensuring that you can burn them to death over enough allotted time, regardless of what damage you have dealt throughout the game. High speed also just becomes extremely important in the late game, where you are looking just to secure that last bit of burn, where you've lost your board state. They've managed to remove most of your resonators, and now they have like a 3-drop or a 4-drop in play that you can't get over. At that point, you're just looking for sunderings and high speeds just to finish out like the last 1,200 damage with double high speed and a sundering, or something along those lines.
Gotcha.
So there are a lot of different reasonings behind ensuring that high speed was actually kept at a 4 count in that case.
So with the 4 high speed, both having, like, all 4 of them having remnant, and then the Heaven Sundering, you said that you have 4,800 points of burn damage, which is a lot more than the other Kirik decks. But on top of that, you're also main decking a copy of Power Spike. So is that just for style points, or did you just think that people were going to have 6,000 life? Or
In the original testing, we had tested this list for a little over 2 months. And
Hmm.
in the original testing, Power Spike felt very, very powerful. And we loved it in every matchup that we played, including even the mirror match.
Hmm.
As we continued to test it, especially towards like the last 3 weeks, I believe, we learned that Power Spike was nowhere near as effective as we thought it was. We were almost never playing it. We were almost never choosing to actually keep it in hand. But because of that, those early results in our initial testing, we wanted to keep it in there just in case. And with Kirik, most games are ending by like turn 4, turn 5. If you have 1 or 2 dead cards in hand, it doesn't matter because you have a hand of like 6 or 7 cards, and you
Right.
wind up finding the cards that you need for every play regardless. So we felt that just in case in those random situations where you needed the power spike, it'd probably be better just to keep it and just suffer the potential dead card in hand rather than take it out and then realize, oh man, we actually did need it. Our doubts later on were unjustified. But
Right. So in the games where you're actually winning, the dead card in your hand doesn't matter because you're killing them on turn 4. But if that ever doesn't happen, then the game is probably getting dragged out by like a guild deck. So just
right,
having that copy in your deck is going to be impactful. That's actually a really, really good insight there, I think.
right.
So with the 4 high speed, what a lot of the other decks I saw were doing, where they were using Welser to combo with the high speed. You bring in the Welser before untap, you give it swiftness, you awaken it possibly, and then you like also give another resonator swiftness and swing in for a whole bunch of damage. So with
Right.
the 4 high speed, what made you not want to include Welser in your list?
Honestly, I thought that Lorite was going to be much more of a problem than it was.
Hmm.
I thought that people were going to be having Will open at all times, and that Lorite was always going to be there, especially with Chimimi drawing 3 cards,
Hmm.
especially with Gil potentially milling it off and then getting it back to hand quite effectively. So I thought that with Lorite being everywhere, that the Welser just attempting to God Art for 2 Will and then them low writing and them plussing in tempo over you was such a huge loss in tempo and not getting anything out of it that I didn't want to get baited into that. And so we decided to keep it out from the list. But after actually playing the event, there were a number of times that people would just tap out and would leave themselves open to a potential Welser high speed play. Or there were a number of times where just through plays and baits like Hoel Pig and stuff that they wouldn't lorite them, and you would be able to figure out, oh, they don't have any lorites in hand. They don't have access to them. Okay, well, Welser high speed was really good right now. It's unfortunate I didn't put it in the list. So,
I
so honestly, after the event, I definitely would put it as one of in the list, and Power Spike would definitely come out of the main board and go to the sideboard at that point.
Gotcha. So it was just kind of like you've been testing this deck for 2 months. So at that point, when you're testing with other people who've been playing against it, then they kind of know exactly what to
Right.
play around. But at an event, other people weren't really ready for that kind of play. So
Right.
that does make a lot of sense. So moving back to something you said when we were talking about high speed is that the reason you played 4 is because you were expecting a lot of Viola. And when people play Viola, then your high speed count kind of gets cut in half. But at the same time, you're playing Play Dead, which is arguably even more hard countered by Viola. So what was the logic behind that? And while I'm on this subject, you're also playing 4 of the Pig Squadron, which is a card
Right.
that when it dies, gets another guy to the field. So with 4 Play Dead, 4 Piggy, it seems like you're just always trying to preserve your board as much as possible. So how did that end up on the list?
Most of our testing was actually against the Gil matchup because everyone was so along the thought process that if it can't beat Gil, then it's not even worth trying because it definitely can't beat Time Spinning Witch. And so we wanted to ensure that no matter what, our Gil matchup was a success. Viola is actually much harder to fit into the Gil list than it is into, say, Time Spinning Witch and Chimimi. And
Absolutely.
so because of that, it came up less often. The other thing is most of the time when you're going for a play dead play, typically you've played one will for supremacy, getting a PL to board. You're swinging with it. They block with, let's say, a Viola, and they Winds of Vitality it in order to ensure your PL is going to die. So you let the damage go through, but before then you wind up play deading it to attempt to get it back. It goes to the grave. They then banish off the Viola to ensure it doesn't go through. At that point, they've spent 3 will. They've spent 2 on the Viola and 1 on
Wins of
the
Vitality.
Winds of Vitality, and they've lost 2 cards. You've lost 2 cards as well, being the PL and the Play Dead, but you've plussed 1 will in that instance. Your 2 will, 1 on Play Dead, 1 on Supremacy, to their 3 will. Any little plus in tempo winds up making leaps and bounds for Kirik because the deck is all about being able to get ahead on tempo, getting ahead on will, and ensuring that you can play faster than they can because they're eventually going to grind you out no matter what. And
Right.
so that was really the big purpose behind it, and just maintaining board states that if they don't have the Viola, that Play Dead is just going to be able to 1-for-1 with their removal spell. If they spent 1 on it, cool, we just equaled out, and I get to maintain my board state. It gets to swing again. At that point, you have to waste another removal spell to get over the body. If you wind up spending anything that's more than 1 will to get over the body, then I'm just plussing in tempo at that point.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense, just given the fact that the mana can be very constraining for Gil, especially when they're trying to find the time for their flip turn. You know,
right.
Investing 3 mana into just getting their ruler online is a very dangerous time for a Gil player, because that's the turn that you can just burn them out if they're not really prepared for it. So that does make a lot of sense. And yeah,
one of the main... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what about the Pig Squadron as a 4 of, which is something that wasn't even really popular back when Scheherazade was a deck?
Right. So a lot of people have been doing Shungung Pao with Black Tiger in the list, and at that point, Pig Squadron winds up taking less space in the list and equating to something relatively similar. And I would say Pig Squadron actually does more work than those 2 cards in general. So what Shungung Pao does in general is you're spending about 3 will to get a conditional 2-drop 7/7 with swiftness alongside a 1-drop 4/4 with flying. That actually is going to burn you, which again winds up hurting the mirror match a bit, taking your own life. Kirik is extremely bloodthirsty in that sense. While on the other side with Pig Squadron, what you're doing is you're actually getting in essence a 2-drop 8/8 with swiftness and precision, and we'll come back to that in a second because the precision is actually extremely pivotal. And then you also get a 1-drop Hoel Pig. In every instance, the 2-drop 8/8 swiftness precision is stronger than the conditional 2-drop swiftness 7/7 that Gung Pao represents. And then the 1-drop Hoel Pig is much more pivotal to list than a 1-drop Black Spot Tiger that's just going to burn you as well.
Right.
So I'd much rather have the 3-drop Pig Squadron since it's stronger and it gets access to a Hoel Pig. And Hoel Pig is so important with 4 Lorite running around everywhere.
Oh, I imagine. And especially both Hoel Pig and Pig Squadron have even more synergies with Play Dead, whereas Shen, Gung Bao, and the Tiger have actually like 0 synergy. Like you almost never cast it on those cards. All right, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the other thing with precision on Pig Squadron that actually is extremely relevant with the high speeds as well. If the opponent does tap out at any time, but they leave their J ruler untapped, assuming they're safe, a Pig Squadron alongside like double high speed or a Pig Squadron with a Freyla pumps it up to where it's a 1200 attack damage. And at that point, you're actually able to use the precision to swing into an untapped Time Spinning Witch or an untapped Gil. And you, of course, you're only going for this play when you know for a fact that they have no responses to it when they're tapped out because they've wasted the will on other plays and they just weren't expecting you to actually have a precision resonator or they have like no elementals in their grave as a Gil. Right. And at that point, you're able to just swing into their J ruler and literally erase their win con for the most part.
And that's where every other aspect of your deck being very heavily tempo focused comes into play, because when you are constantly applying pressure through tempo, they are more likely to find themselves in a situation where they have to tap out in order to be able to not lose or have any chance of coming back in the game.
Exactly.
All right. Well, it sounds awesome. So I want to talk about some of the meta decks, or at least like the decks that I was expecting, and I'm sure that's very similar to the lists that you were expecting. And I want you to kind of like rank from like easiest to hardest, like where you, I guess, expected them to be, where you maybe found them to be in the tournament. Just like when you sit down and your opponent flips this ruler, what are you like? Oh, thank goodness. And what are you like? I'm maximum clenched on my butthole for that one.
So honestly, because go ahead.
Oh yeah, so the rulers are Jamimi, Time Spinning Witch, Gil, Ayu, Kirik. Those are the 5 that ended up making the top 8 at the GP. And then also Brunhilde was kind of on everyone's mind after the Singapore events, but didn't end up showing up. So those are the 6 rulers, I would say. Rank them as you will.
Okay. So originally my thoughts on it before the event are actually different from after the event. Going into the event, I assumed that some of the weaker matchups, the ones that I was going to have a stronger chance against were probably going to be Chamimi, Gil, Kirik, and not Brunhilde. So really just Chamimi, Gil, and Kirik at that point. I thought that those were definitely going to be the easier matchups, specifically being that Chamimi is so dedicated to developing its own board state that it doesn't really have room to play enough defenses. I was definitely proven wrong about that at the event. They ran Winds of Vitality as a playset. They ran for Fair Spell. They ran, what was it? Elemental Blast, I believe it's called.
Yeah,
the one
cards.
cost.
Yep.
Yeah. And then a couple Chimimi, the two of them that specifically made top 8, wound up having additional hate in their rune deck. They had additional hate in the sideboard. They actually sided triple Powerless Dragonoid alongside triple Scarlet's Agony. So just all of that hate altogether was a lot more than I expected. I assumed at most Chimimi players were going to be sideboarding like 3 to 4 Agony because they figured, it's good for Kirik, it's good for IU. And then I expected like 2 Powerless Dragonoid at most, and without all the main board hate. But that totally blew me away. But now, after the event, I would definitely rank Chimimi as one of the hardest matchups for Kirik, especially going forward as they continue to optimize their lists. I believe that it will eventually become an unwinnable matchup for Kirik. As far as Kirik and Gil, pretty much the event proved my thoughts on that Gil is a very easy matchup for Kirik for the most part. You just apply way too much pressure and out-tempo them early on, that on their flip, they've just put themselves in a dangerous position, spending 3 will just to gain extra cards, but being unable to actually play them effectively except for Arrival. And then the Kirik mirror match, the way I built the deck without Null Magic Stone in the main board and siding into it, and then the one main board cross counter was huge in that matchup as well. Sure. Just being able to ensure that, they're going to go in for lethal, and then you're able to spend 1 will to ensure, well, okay, I'm not dying this turn, and then I'm just going to be able to crack back next turn. So, and then the fact that it's just so easily searchable with Kirik, because by turn 4 you've already dug about 25 to 30 cards deep in the deck. So.
Did you ever get to a situation where you just had cycled through your entire deck and you just had memorized every draw for the rest of the game? Did that ever come up for you?
It almost came up a couple times, but usually Supremacy shuffling your deck kind of messes with that. So, but there were 1 or 2 games, specifically my game 2 against the only Chimimi player to actually beat me at the event. He made top 8 as well, and he was the one I was referencing with all of his hate for Kirik. My game 2 against him, I did not see a Supremacy until card 26.
That's pretty deep.
it was turn 4 that I finally found the Supremacy. And so by then, I'd pretty much memorized the entire deck. I'm like, cool, all 4 Supremacy near the bottom. This is great. Oh, man. But yeah, going into the event, I also assumed that Time Spinning Witch was a very unfavorable matchup if the Time Spinning Witch player went second. If I got to go second, I assumed it was very favorable unless they opened up like triple or quadruple Dragon's Breath. At that point, it just becomes so hard to keep pressure on board. And then once they start dropping the Mosasauruses and God's Arting, it just becomes unwinnable at that point. In the actual event, I wound up 2-0ing my only Time Spinning Witch matchup. And my buddy, Will Lugar, who brought the exact same list as me, we had been test playing for 2 months together. He played against 3 Time Spinning Witch players. 2 of them he 2-0'd, and then he randomly plays against you in the top 8, and for some reason gets 2-0'd by you. So we're still kind of astounded by, and we have honestly no idea what exactly the Time Spinning Witch matchup is actually like, because we thought it was terrible, then we get proven wrong, and then he gets matched up against you and just gets wrecked. So we have no idea.
So I do want to chime in here. So the Time Spinning Witch that you 2-0'd, the only one you played all day was versus Brandon Bremont. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And,
yes.
So you and Will are playing the card for card exact same list, and me and Brandon Bremont are playing card for card the exact same list. So I really have no idea what's going on here. We'll have to crack that nutshell maybe at another time. But so TSW and then IU and Brunhilde, where are those going on the list?
IU was something very scary, but I assumed that IU was going to have like 2 to 3 representatives at the event at most. I did not expect, what was it, like 6 IU, I think?
I believe so, yeah.
And one of them wound up facing 3 Kiriks all day. The other faced 4 Kiriks all day. And I believe one of them did not face a single green deck all day.
Yeah, I think Cal only played 1 green deck, he said, in like the entire Swiss. And that was 9 rounds of Swiss, so...
Yeah.
God bless that.
So I believe that was a huge contribution to keeping them at the top tables, because I know early on, especially for the first 5 or 6 rounds of the event, the top tables were just flooded with Kirik. And so if an IU player managed to not play against any green, get to the top tables early, and then play against like Kirik for the next 4 rounds, it's just an easy matchup for them at that point, and definitely contributed to them performing so well. Definitely was a good meta call on their point, knowing that Kirik was still going to be greatly represented, and IU is extremely favorable in that matchup. Another reason behind the main board cross counter, just hoping to pressure them enough that by the time they flip and go into swing, that if you can cross counter on that swing, that you can just kill them on the following turn. Unfortunately, Lightning Cave turn 1, is a problem.
I would
And
imagine.
the AU player I face against in round 9, which is Cal, opened Lightning Cave. He had it in hand turn 1 both games, but he played it turn 2 game 1, and then turn 1 game 2. Then we played against each other again in top 8, and game 1 once again Lightning Cave turn 1.
Wow.
So,
That
yeah,
man is an IU god. Let me tell you, that's skill right there.
apparently. So that definitely contributed to IU's success a bit. I do believe it's still a very pivotal deck within the meta, and any deck that's not prepared for it is definitely going to have issues representing itself, and especially topping an event. But I definitely do think that the Kirik not getting a second or a third top within top 8 was definitely done because of the AU remaining at the top tables.
Right. So. And I actually did play against Kirik in my round 8 and round 9, so I think I also unfortunately contributed to that. And I'm kind of upset because I would have loved to see more Kirik in the top. I was terrified of all the Shamimi, but yeah, I don't know. And then Brunhilde, the white-black Brunhilde or the mono-white Brunhilde. What's your opinions on that matchup?
Okay, so one of our friends, Jared, within our group, Jared Bradham, he brought Brunhilde to the event, and we had been test playing with him nonstop with his Brunhilde list. He was playing a black-white variant. It was really neat, and we felt that as long as Brunhilde focused more so on its white side, specifically with miscalcs and chastisings, and just the additional heal off your runes, that Brunhilde becomes a very difficult matchup for Kirik, and I believe... you could even argue that Brunhilde is probably 60 to 70% favored in that matchup at that point, especially going into game 2 and 3. However, if Brunhilde focuses on its color diversity, which helps in all of its other matchups for the most part, specifically like black, which black with the discard helps in the time spinning witch matchup, it helps in the Gil matchup. If it focuses more so on that, then it just loses to Kirik because discard is just too slow to be able to deal with the immediate threats on board. So I really felt it was just completely dependent on what color they focused on. And I never got to play against any Brunhilde. I believe Will Lugar played against 2 Brunhilde at the event. I believe he 2-0'd both of them. I can't remember exactly. I know he won against both of them. But
gotcha. Cool.
And I believe they both focused on black more so than white.
Usually, the Brunhilde list that I saw we're playing like the 6 black stones, only the 4 white stones, and it does give you the life gain out of the rune deck and then like the miscalcs out of the board, but your resonators are just not as efficient for the low mana costs of the Kirik deck, and especially miscalc like at best just trades for a play dead, and then like you still take damage because a play dead makes it come back in recovered, and then you can attack with it. So I do imagine that if they are focusing on black, they don't have enough white mana to really keep up with the kind of aggression Kirik can play. So makes a lot of sense. So you do have, like I said, one of the more unique Kirik builds from what everyone else just thought was an autopilot, like the deck builds itself kind of thing. So what are your thoughts, even on playing the deck, what are your thoughts on Kirik being perceived as the easy-to-play deck and also like the kind of deck that builds itself, and you really kind of broke that? You're probably 10 to 15 cards different from what everyone was expecting.
Okay, so as far as like the skill floor and the skill ceiling with the deck, there honestly isn't that much of a difference between just some random player picking up the deck and then somebody who's been piloting the deck for months and months and knows what they're doing with the list. There isn't a whole lot of difference. The plays still do play themselves out for the most part. The biggest issue with it that most players don't understand is keeping Will open is huge with the deck. And so I played a list that kind of optimized itself around that with 4 Pathway Part cross counter and 4 Play Dead, just ensuring that you can keep Will open. The deck changes that I actually made to it were really just to tailor itself towards the mirror match and a couple other random matchups as well, like the Gil matchup. And I believe that given time, Kirik players would have just come to that conclusion as well, that play dead is extremely important in the Gil matchup. It's extremely important in a couple other matchups as well. But when it comes to actually playing the deck out, that's probably the most pivotal part, is knowing to always keep at least some will open for Play Dead or some will open for Pathway Part, because that's how you just auto lose to a Lorite 7 Disciples coming into play. Is you don't leave any will open, you've swung out, you probably have like double PL and a Piggy on board, and then they drop a Disciples, they take out your PL, which is a huge amount of pressure that you can contribute to the game, and then they gain 9 life off of that on top of that, and now you're put in a position to where, okay, so I'm left with Piggy and PL. If PL actually swings through, it's just equating for the 9 life that they just gained off of their disciples, and then Piggy for 5 more isn't doing much. And now in order to deal any more damage that turn, I have to actually like go through and drop another PL, high speed it out, hope that they don't have something to stop that, like an agony or whatever. And then even if they do stop it, at that point, since I haven't dealt with the disciples, it goes back to them, and then they just wind up completely refilling. Another problem with it is if you don't deal with the disciples, or if you decide to now deal with the disciples and it's gone, you pass back to them. If you haven't dealt with the Lorite as well, now just another disciples comes down. And at that point, like, okay, cool, they're now taking out a second PL. They're gaining another 9 life. And I've already wasted an entire turn of tempo and resources just to take out 1 disciples. So it just becomes extremely problematic when you don't leave Will open to immediately like pathway part the disciples back to hand, or to sundering the Lorite, or to play dead your Resonator so that it comes back. And I think that's one of the big differences between a skilled and a non-skilled Kirik player. Outside of that, there really isn't much of a difference. The deck really does play itself for the most part. You just swing early, and then you just burn out to finish. There are just minor details that some people tend to miss with it.
Right. You look at your opening 5 cards, and then you say, "Oh, look, what's my best turn 1? Is it the 9/9, or is it burn their face for 4?" Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Most people can kind of figure that out. So I did want to talk about the impact of specific card choices on matchups. I feel like we've kind of gone over that a bit, so I think we'll move back into the sideboard. So you did say that the black stones didn't want to be main board because you didn't want to sack the Kirik matchup, but you did feel that overall the Majin Dark Elves and the Ray of the Black Elves were going to be good against most of the field.
Yeah.
So
anything but AU and Kirik, Majin Dark Elf is extremely explosive, especially like going second with the Energized Coin, opening a Null Magic Stone, tapping, and then dropping double Majin Dark Elf for 1,200 damage turn 1, threatening another 1,200 damage the following turn is just insane. Majin Dark Elf definitely adds to the explosive nature of the deck, but it pales in comparison to just basic PLs in the mirror match, especially like when a PL is on board. And if you swing with Majin Dark Elf, they can just block it with a PL and just blow it out at that point. And then the Null Magic Stone just continuing to burn you. And then there's also just the fact that in the mirror match that if you open the Majin Dark Elves without the Null Magic Stones, you're dealing with a number of dead cards in hand. If you open the Null Magic Stone without the Dark Elf, then now you're just burning yourself and you have no explosive combo to back that up.
Right.
So you're sacrificing life for literally nothing at that point.
So one of the things that the traditional Kirik decks were doing was, because they were playing the Tiger, because they were playing the Shengongbao, they weren't as reliant on finding the Black-Red Stone to be able to cast the Majin Dark Elf, because they could play the Black Spot Tiger, ping themselves to give it flying, and then they could play the Majin Dark Elf. When you did side in the Dark Elves, did you ever have any problems being able to cast them? Like, was not being able to find the stones in a reasonable amount of time? Because you are an aggro deck, but you're looking for your 40% turn 1. If the Majin Dark Elf comes down on turn 3 instead of turn 1, is it fast enough to win those matchups without the Tiger, or was it really just like no problem? Anytime the 1-mana 6/6 comes down, it's fine.
So at that point, what matchups are we referring to? Are we referring to like Gil Time Spinning Witch matchups, Chimimi matchups, which are more grindy, or okay?
Kind of all three, right? Anything that you would bring it in against, which would be like as far as the best guess though, would be Chimimi, Gil, and then Witch.
Okay, so against those matchups, you're usually going specifically Chimimi with all the hate that it had main board. I actually was going to like turn 7 or 8 against Chimimi.
Wow.
Yeah, the deck is not built to go that long. That's for sure. But in those matchups, like you're seeing Null Magic Stone pretty easily by turn 3. You're going to consistently see, I believe it's like an 86% chance of seeing a 4 of Stone in your Stone deck by turn 3. So for the most part, you should see it by then. And honestly, like your early turn 1 being a Supremacy is still very optimal. It may not be, as explosive as double Majin Dark Elf or whatever, but it's still very strong just to turn 1 Supremacy, turn 2 high speed Hoel Pig, and then, oh look, I got my Null Magic Stone. Okay, now I can start playing Majin Dark Elf with it. So it never really became a problem at the event not having the stone. The biggest problem with it was I believe like 2 games where I would open 2 or 3 Null Magic Stone early on with no Majin Dark Elves, and now at this point I'm just burning myself to death. I'm taking like 1,800 damage one game in a Chimimi matchup, which was just extremely painful. I had triple Null Magic Stone as my first 3 stones with no Majin Dark Elves.
So no problem not seeing the stones, more of a problem of I'm playing against an aggro green deck and I start the game at half-life.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so this is your first Grand Prix top, if I am correct. Is that accurate? So the last time I think that I was seeing your names on the top tables, you made top 16 at GP Atlanta with Mikage. Right. And then I was like, hey, Joey, you dummy, you can't play Mikage when Feyer's really good. And then you were like, actually, I can. And you went on to get your invite at the following ARG with, like, some random new tech with, like, Faria and World of Madness. And you were like, yeah, I can be Feyer. I was like, all right, Joey, I'm following you. And now I make a video with Ben, and I'm like, yeah, Kirik can't do anything against Gil, can't do anything against Time Spinning Witch. And you're like, actually, Ryan, I've got something I want to tell you. And so you come and you top your first GP, once again, proving me wrong to get your invite to Worlds. But what I'm interested in is how you go from the Mikage guy, because you have been playing Mikage for almost a year, and you're like, all of a sudden you're just like, actually, I'm gonna be the aggro player. Everyone else thinks Kirik is bad, but even though I think, like, I've been playing Control for the past, like, since I played Force of Will, I'm gonna play aggro now. So where did that change come from? You said you've been playing this deck for 2 months. Like, I didn't know you could go that long without thinking about Mikage. Like, how did that happen?
Well, unfortunately, Mikage did have to rotate, so, you know, that somewhat contributes to it. But honestly, the main reason I got myself on Kirik was going into this event 2 months prior, we all believed that Kirik was still going to be highly represented, and someone within our group had to be the Kirik player. Someone had to be the Kirik player to play test again. So I was like, you know what, fine, I'll play it. You guys can all play against me, whatever. And so I decided to make that sacrifice, and through doing that, I actually came to realize, hey, why am I not playing this deck? Why wouldn't I play this deck? So I actually started really becoming attached to the deck and trying to figure out different ways to mess around with it. Jared Bradham was actually in charge of the Freyla Servant of Demon Fire tech, which is really interesting in the deck.
Talk about
towards the end of it, specifically like the last 3 weeks right before we went to the event, Will Lugar kind of went from Gil to jumping on the Kirik list as well, because we had test played that matchup so much. He originally wanted to just play Gil, but he felt that it was so unfavorable against Kirik. Unless you open like double absolute awareness, Lorite plus Paladin by turn 3, that you're just not winning the matchup. And even if you do at that point, Kirik can still power over it. Wow, it just becomes so unfavorable for Gil. So he actually decided to jump on the Kirik train as well. And Jared almost did, but he just stayed with Brunhilde instead, since he really enjoys that deck a lot. So
no shame with saying with what's fun.
Cool, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, to wrap it up, I did see that you had a pretty cool couple of Facebook posts on the US group and on your wall. And I saw that I believe your mother, Denise, said that next time you'll go ahead and get that paid invite. So is your mom very supportive of your hobby? I don't talk to my mom at all about Force of Will. She's like, good luck in your tournament, honey. I'll see you in another year or something. So do you?
I mean, they always want to know what's going on in my life. And then I'm like, well, I mean, it's Force of Will. Do you really want to hear about it? Yeah, we want to hear about it. So then you start explaining, and then they just kind of gloss over, like, oh, okay. And I'm like, so you really didn't want to hear about it. But no, she is very supportive. Both my parents are very supportive of it. My sisters are as well. So it's actually surprising to have that much encouragement from the family. So
awesome. Well,
I'm very appreciative of it.
Very cool, man. Well, congratulations again for your GP top, and hopefully I will see you again, or see you at Worlds this year if you decide to make it out there. You got a whole year to prepare for it, so you better make
I'll be there this year. I'll be there.
Excellent, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me, and yeah, that'll be it. Thank you very much for everyone watching, and this was Joey Schilling.
Thank you.